Welcome to Life Skills Unfiltered, the podcast where we keep it real about life in the SEN community. I'm your host, Jo Aythray, and I'm so glad you're here. This is the space where parents, educators and experts come together to have honest and meaningful conversations about the challenges we all face and the changes we want to see. Today we're diving into a topic that resonates with so many of us, building bridges between school and home. Whether you're a parent, a teacher or a SENCO, you've probably found yourself wondering, why is this so hard sometimes? Miscommunication, misunderstanding, and a lack of resources can make navigating these relationships feel overwhelming. But when schools and families work together, amazing things can happen. To help us unpack this, we've got two incredible guests with us today. Firstly, we have Gary Aubin, a former teacher and SENCO, who now works across schools and trusts from across the country to champion inclusive practices. He's even advised the government on curriculum and assessment. Gary is also the author of The Lone SENCO and co-author of The Parent's Guide to SEND. Joining Gary is Steve Hull, a parent who knows firsthand the ups and downs of navigating SEND support systems from home. Stephen is a dad to two young children, the eldest of whom is autistic. With years of lived experience and as a full-time caregiver to his children, he brings a unique perspective to the table. Together, he and Gary co-wrote The Parent's Guide to SEND, making them the perfect duo to tackle today's conversation. So, what are the things teachers and SENCos wish parents knew? And what do families wish school staff understood about their reality? Today, we're laying it all out there. No sugarcoating, no jargon, just honest, practical insights that we hope will spark real change. So, let's dive in. Gary and Steve, welcome to Life Skills Unfiltered. It's really brilliant to have you here today. So Steve, this is the first time we've met and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your story as a fellow parent of a child with SEN. And Gary, we have met before briefly, having heard you speak at a SENCO conference up in Dudley recently. I actually got quite emotional hearing you speak to SENCos and to school staff, and the way that you really acknowledge the challenges they face, but still really advocating for inclusion and challenging staff to think a bit differently. So it's been brilliant to have you both here to talk about the vital relationship between home and school. So first off, can you tell me a little bit more about yourselves, your views on how the home-school relationship currently works and why you're passionate about it?
Yeah, thanks, Jo. Really great to be here. Thank you so much for having us. So I'm Gary. I spend a lot of my time working with school staff and in schools, and have a school teacher and SENCO background myself. I feel very passionate about the sort of co-working of school and families because it's just such an obvious win-win all round. If schools aren't using the experience and information of the person who knows that pupil, that child or young person best, then they're never going to have the full picture on that child and what they need and what they're communicating. And it's just the sort of respectful, wonderful thing to do. And the benefits are so clear. And the schools who get their family partnership right, and where that's genuine, and where even when things are busy, even if the child isn't making decisions that the school would want them to make, that even in all those things, the communication remains reliable and respectful. And consistent, then that's such an obvious win all round. So yeah, I feel very passionate about this.
Fantastic, thank you. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Jo. Thanks very much for having us. Yeah, so my two kids are 8 and 6. The eldest is autistic. He goes to a special school, and my youngest son goes to a mainstream school. So I have the kind of those two sides to look at things through, and lots of different experiences to compare as well from those two settings. And my eldest son did go to a mainstream setting initially as well. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think, of home school relationships. And I do think it's really important that we all work carefully together and take it seriously. And I think that when it works, makes such a massive difference to our life as a family and to my son, that it's one thing that really should be prioritized.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think same as you, I've had very different experiences across kind of the last 14, 15 years where I've been doing it with my daughter in education, is those relationships actually have such a huge impact on families. And I'm sure they have a huge impact on SENCOs as well, and we'll be talking a bit more about that. But just actually the emotional impact and the way that we how that impacts our lives more widely. I don't know if necessarily that's as well understood as it should be, and actually how when we've worked with brilliant school staff, that impact has been life-changing for us actually. And then when we've had more difficult relationships, the level of stress that's caused has been really quite significant, and then translated into our relationship with our daughter and the wider school and everything else. So really, really pivotal. So it sounds like there's quite a lot to kind of understand about each other. And I know that I've often, in times of frustration, I just really wish they knew what my life looked like, or I really wish they understood why I am the way I am right now in this meeting. So I wonder, maybe Gary, who we can start with you. What's one of the first things you wish school staff wish families knew, or would you even frame it in that way?
So I think we recognise, firstly, Joe, to say we recognise that there is often there can feel like far too much of a gap between families and schools, and that communication and partnership just isn't there enough. We recognise that it can be really hard, and obviously Steve knows this directly more than I, to navigate, and you know this, Joe, to navigate that SEND world as a parent can be, you're often starting on page one, and there's a lot of high levels of emotion alongside it. So really tricky, and hence us putting this book together to try and represent the views of families and the views of schools, and supporting parents from both of those perspectives. So that's kind of what the Parents Guide of SEND is hopefully about. In terms of things that that school staff wish parents knew, I'd soften that slightly to things that we hope that families can appreciate, because of course, we know directly from working with lots of families that it's a really, really tricky journey that they're on. So actually saying, well, I just wish they could, understand this and that, it's probably it gives a little less respect for the difficult role that many families face than should be the case. But one thing that I hope families can appreciate then is that I think the relative role of diagnostic labels to schools. Sometimes those diagnostic labels are absolutely positively transformative to children and young people who know, oh, okay, I'm not, I don't have those negative self-image that I sort of anymore, because actually I have this label that means I help to understand myself, advocate for myself. They can be transformational to families to know, oh, okay, right, we're sort of not alone. My child isn't the only person who finds these things difficult. And there's a name and a sort of description, and there's other children and other families. It can also, in terms of sort of accessing services and supports and resources, those diagnostic labels, of course, have their place. But to class teachers and to SENCOs and to schools, they're often not the most important thing. The most important thing that many, many school staff value, in my experience, is, including SENCOs and teachers and others, is knowing that child and being, or young person, and being on an endless journey to keep developing their knowledge of that child and young person, and particularly what they need and what those barriers to learning and happiness and well-being and success might be. And so diagnostic labels can be a useful part of that story. But actually, sometimes, where there are families that are thinking, well, the school can't do anything until we have that label, or when we get that label for the child, privately or otherwise, things will change enormously in terms of what the school either choose to do or are able to do. Maybe those things won't change enormously. They're often more important to some sort of stakeholders than others. Now, I'm aware with anything I say here, there'll be families who will go, well, actually, no, our experience is, maybe the school said they couldn't do anything unless they have the label. So, of course, there are 20,000 plus schools and colleges and nurseries in this country. And so nothing will be true everywhere. But in my experience, more often than not, the diagnostic label isn't the most important thing. Endlessly trying to find out more about the child, what they need, what makes them happy, how they learn, what those barriers might be. That's the thing that drives schools and their decisions, and of course needs families right at the center of that in order to get that right.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? It's something that, as a parent of a child with Down syndrome, I've never had to face, because that comes with a label at birth, and actually that's almost, I think, one of the advantages of that our community faces is actually it's clearly labelled from day one, and actually it's not something we have to go through. So, Steve, what's your experience around that?
I think for us, it's not I'm going to say something that sounds a bit odd. It's not really been a big deal. I think that when our son was born, from when he was born, he was, just an individual. He was himself, and he's always been autistic. That manifested in different ways as he grew up. But looking back, we kind of know from when he was a baby, really, that we've got a second son, and that was a very different experience. So the label coming about was, I don't know, it wasn't a big deal for us, because by the time he got the label, we knew him so well. He was 3.5, I think. So we knew him so well, and it didn't really change anything. I'd say we also were quite lucky to have that and the HCP before he started school. So it was kind of like, well, we had that in the bank. So it wasn't, we never had that experience that I've heard about with other people where they are kind of desperately looking for those things in order to get support or to get a school place that they haven't got or anything like that. So I wouldn't say that was our experience. So yeah, the label itself was almost like, we had a little toast when he got it, and that was probably, it was a bit of a non-event.
Yeah, so it wasn't something you had to seek out to get. Like, I totally hear what you're saying, Gary. Is a lot of families feel like they need the label to get the support, but it sounds like actually just because of your journey, that support was already kind of being given and in place.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't plain sailing, but I don't think the label was particularly pivotal in the whole process. The borough that we live in North London, Brent, for all of its failings, had quite a good paediatrics team, I think, at the time, and we were identified through the channels through a children's centre that the local authority run, via the speech therapist, and we were referred, and like I say, it wasn't all smooth, but it kind of worked. And we got the diagnosis and everything quite early, and again, I'm going to say relatively easily compared to some stories that I hear and the waiting list that you hear about now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and the support that we were getting and got subsequently kind of all happened along at the same time. So it wasn't like a make or break thing.
Yeah, brilliant. So then kind of looking at the parents' perspective a little bit more, what were the kind of things, and would you use the word I wish they knew, or would you change that phrase? And what would be the kind of the main things that you wish that school staff particularly knew before, well, whilst meeting you and your son and your family?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a million things that I wish they knew. I think that the almost the biggest one for us in terms of my son and what he's like and how he was when he was little, he struggles a lot, still does, now he's 8, still struggles a lot with emotional regulation, and so we have to build a world around him which is pretty predictable, centered in routine, and centered around how he communicates and being able to communicate with him. That's a little bit more flexible now that he's 8 and he talks and can understand a bit more about what's going on and therefore be a bit more flexible. But when he was little, when he was 2, 3, 4, it manifested in him being like very rigid in routines. Otherwise, he got very stressed. And for us, that meant that our family life became about kind of managing his environment, because without doing that, I mean like micromanaging, without doing that every day, he would kind of lose it quite easily and become stressed and upset and just hideous and scary for him and not nice for anyone. So one thing I think that I wish that teachers or other professionals appreciated is how much of a big deal it is to let go of that, and to trust his well-being, with other people. And the school he's at now, I think they do appreciate that. It's all autistic children in his schools, 50 or 60 children. And the staff are experienced, and they know what families' lives are like, and they know what a big deal it is for parents to let go of their child for 6 hours a day. But that wasn't probably our experience in the first institutional setting that he went to, which was a mainstream nursery. And on the first day we arrived, they didn't know his name. They didn't know. One of the members of staff spoke to him and expected a reply, but he wasn't talking at the time. And the last thing on earth I wanted to do was leave him there, because this poor, vulnerable little thing that I spend like every waking hour looking after and controlling everything around so that he holds it together, which is incredibly draining, suddenly you're supposed to just leave them, in the lion's den with all of these toddlers running around, and people don't even know who he is and what he needs and that kind of thing. So I wish that that teachers, like the good ones do, appreciate what that was like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think some of that really comes from some experiences we've had where, often I think it's one of those things where often parent-school interactions can take time, and it takes time away from the schools and from school staff, and that's challenging for school staff. But actually what I found is where, same as you're kind of, where someone's understood the level of emotion that's involved with handing over this child to this new space, where the staff have taken the time to build that positive relationship with me in the beginning. So they've taken the time at the beginning of that interaction, of that relationship, and we've built trust, and they've over communicated with me. Then actually for the rest of the year, I need significantly less communication from you, because I trust you, and I trust that you know me, and I trust that you will talk to me when you need to talk to me. But where I've had people that have just gone, no, it's fine, we've got this, don't worry, don't come. That's where actually by the end of the year we've had 18 meetings and a difficult time, because we've never built that trust. And I think that a lot of that comes from that building that emotional and kind of relationship with the staff. Gary, is that something that you find at all?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it's on schools and colleges, nurseries, whoever, to invest that time. And if you do that early on, build that relationship, then actually things are much more likely to go right, and families are much more likely to go, I don't want to be in school 3 times a week any more than you want me in school 3 times a week for long meetings. Families generally want to get to a stage where that trust has been earned, and they don't need to, micromanage every moment of what happens during the school day in school for that child. They want to have faith in those practitioners there. And all that work around transition is, of course, key. All that work where, not in Steve's experience there in that initial setting, but where the school, college, nursery knows the child and really shows you on day one that really know the child, and that they're willing to listen and co-produce. That goes so far, doesn't it? So I really agree with what Steve's saying there.
Yeah, brilliant. And so moving kind of on a little bit, what is another kind of point that you think, Gary, that you wish or that you hope that families appreciate about SENCOs schools?
Yeah, and again, I'm conscious anything I say is not true for everyone, but what I hope that families are always able to appreciate is just how much teachers, school staff, college staff generally desperately want it to work and desperately value all children. I've never met a teacher who didn't go into teaching, at least in part because they want children to thrive and to learn and to be happy. I've never known a leader who isn't at least in very large part motivated by, I can have more influence on making sure that our school helps children, young people to do really well. Now, clearly, there are many issues within that, aren't there? Because we all have different priorities, slightly different priorities, and sometimes wildly different priorities for what we think are the most important things. And one, leader might think getting over 90% attendance for every child is the most important thing, because if they're not here, they can't learn. That might be one view that is, contentious, problematic in some cases, but comes from a good place and is true more than it's not true. But actually, every single adult I've met in education, just like I've never met a family member who didn't want the absolute best for their child, I've never met someone who goes into education and doesn't want the absolute best for children, including children with SEND. Now, of course, there might be people listening or watching this who are like, well, that's not my experience at all. So, of course, it's worth exploring that a little bit. So why, if what I've said is true, why doesn't it always go brilliantly, I suppose? And there are many reasons, aren't there? And sometimes there are factors that prevent school staff, let's say teachers or TAs, from delivering exactly what families would want. And those might be pressures on resources that are very real, aren't they? Schools under enormous financial pressure in many parts of the country. It might be about time. I know what I need to give here, but there's 7 other children with need, and I just haven't got the time to do it. It might be about curriculum pressures. We know that many sort of stages of the national curriculum have got a lot in it. And so if there's a curriculum pressure to get through the book or get onto the next topic or whatever for 30 children, that can be a real pressure. That can be a compromising factor on giving that child, your child, exactly what they want. Sometimes it's about expertise, and it's about a child might present in a different way, show different behaviors, for example, in a way that teacher hasn't come across before. And it might be that's the thing that's blocking there. Or it might be about whole school policies, where actually it feels like the school is walking in one direction and what this child needs is in a slightly different direction. And that's problematic. And all those things are very real pressures, aren't they? And they impact upon what a child with SEND gets in their day. So that's really, really important. But in my experience, I hope that everyone can hold on to the fact that it almost never comes down to any adult not wanting the absolute best for a child. It's about various pressures that sometimes can be overcome, that don't deserve to be compromised, because every parent quite rightly expects and wants the best for their child. But actually, in that spirit of we're all guided, despite our slightly different priorities, or sometimes wildly different priorities, we're guided by a principle that is as true for you as it is for me, which is we want this child to be thriving, to be doing well.
And so often those relationships can become, and for all of those reasons, can become quite combative, I think, sometimes. And that's where you get the real difficulties. And I know, and again, I think it comes back to that transparency and honesty from the very beginning. Because I think as a parent, I know, I'm also a governor of a school. I've also worked out in kind of outreach into schools. So I kind of see a little bit of both sides and always have. I think if people are open and honest with you and say, you know what, these are the things that I'm thinking about, these are my clashes, these are the difficulties I'm facing. If they're a bit more vulnerable with you and say, you know what, I want this to happen and we want this to work, this is what I can do, and then it actually gets done, then I think parents are a lot more likely to be able to appreciate that. I think the difficulty comes with where people are promised things or said, yeah, we can do that, and then it doesn't happen, or they're just told, no, we can't do that, that's not what we do. And it's building that kind of relationship. And I think often starts from the very beginning. I don't know your experience, Steve, but what we found often, my daughter went through mainstream to year 10. She's only just recently moved into special school, and we had to fight a lot of preconceptions around who should be in mainstream settings for her to get there. But pretty much every school we went to said, we don't do you're not for us, we don't. And to the point where they fought really hard legally, spent a lot of money on lawyers to not have her in those settings. And then once they got her, you know what, they did really well with her, and she did really well. So it was kind of them building those relationships about being open and honest and transparent at the beginning. If that had happened, we might not have found that. And Steve, is that something that you find?
My experience, I think what Gary said is absolutely true, that I don't think there are teachers out there who don't have the best interests of the children at heart, including children with SEND. My experience, though, is that some are just better at it than others. And I'd say in both cases, both settings where my son's been, they have been relatively open, transparent, available. It's just in one of them it works really well, and the other one it didn't really work very well. And it was almost like in the first case they were playing lip service to those things. So they sort of had a list of things they should be doing, like communicating with you or visiting you at home or whatever it was. But when it came down to it, the sort of nitty-gritty of actually making those things work in practice, the meat wasn't there on the bone, if that makes sense. So that was kind of what we found. And what made it, I'm not saying that everything there was negative by any means, but sometimes they would then sort of make you question yourself almost. If we were asking a lot of questions about, well, what about this and what about this that you said, and then they would sort of turn things back on you into, it's kind of hard to describe. Only looking back afterwards can we see the difference between that setting and the second setting he's been in. I just think at the end of the day, it's about the degree of experience that they had, and actually having the capacity to fully empathize with our life and our experiences and our son, rather than just kind of saying and doing the right things.
It's got a culture thing, isn't it, Steve? I don't know if you agree, but there's like strategies and then there's culture, isn't it? And what you can do is go, these are the 10 strategies that you need to do for my child. And you talked about lip service there, Steve. Maybe that's like you can pay lip service to something and do this, and they have their experience, they go out with this person for that intervention, but actually a culture of respect, love, nurture, care, and high expectations, but high expectations with support in place to make them realistic. Actually, that culture piece has to run through a whole setting, doesn't it? And that's, you can't always put your finger, but when you see it.
I think that's right. And I'd say another striking thing between again the two settings, which for us is quite a useful contrast in some senses, is what you just said there, Gary, which is that culture and the role of the leader of the institution in setting that culture. And the school he's at now, the head teacher's actually just retired at Christmas, so there's a new one, but she'd been there for 15, 20 years and was dedicated to the children's experience and their learning and being the school for those children and those families. That was her top priority, and you could tell that she was anti-corporate. So she would have spats with the local authority, spats with Ofsted, and she was happy to do that because she knew what she was doing at the end of the day was the best thing for the children. And again, contrasting with the other setting, the head teacher there was, we used to sort of joke that she was might be better suited to a job in the city, seemed much more interested in the bottom line, was really, I remember one time she had the SENCO, I know because I got to know the SENCO quite well. She had the SENCO tucked up in her office one day, going through all the children on the roll, trying to find out if there are any that might have special needs that they could get some more funding out of, basically. Was much more interested in probably polishing up the institution and showing it to be good than was interested in the heart and soul of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we found very much the same thing. You almost kind of feel a culture before you hear about it. It was almost when you go in and you have those first interactions, you really kind of to feel that culture, and it makes such a massive difference. So
and it is set from the top, and it's those little things that a head teacher or whatever the leader's called will do and say in response to things that they see and that are going on. And individuals completely play a part, but I don't think you can underestimate how big a deal it is for that person at the top to set that tone. And if that isn't there, then I think that ultimately you do experience that as an end user.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And what you then get then, sorry, Joe, is that sort of over and families who quite rightly are going, right, well, then if I can't have confidence that you have a culture where my child will always be the main thing at the center of your decision making, then what you see in my experience is EHCPs that might have 75 different strategies on detailing everything that a teacher needs to be doing throughout the day, which becomes unworkable for staff. And the EHCP for me doesn't get better for having 75 different strategies written into it. It becomes more unworkable for SENCOs trying to communicate with their staff about what the day-to-day should look like, or teachers themselves going through those documents. But of course, it's totally understandable why families do it, because they don't have faith that those things will just be in place because the adults around are, have expertise and an absolute desire to amend their practice accordingly. But actually, there is no replacing, is there? That we can trust us. We trust each other. We listen to each other. We meet regularly, knowing that we're all really busy. That school staff can't have 20 meetings every day because they're too busy doing the work, and families have lives to get on with. But actually, where we can develop those trust and have respectful relationships, then a lot of that, the EHCP needs 75 strategies on, for example, becomes a little bit less the main thing, because the main thing is the child and what they get. And by the way, we have some pieces of paper that are important for getting some funding, for supporting with transition, for being really clear about what people should be doing, and what goals we're aiming for with the child. But it doesn't become the main thing. The main thing becomes the relationships with the child and the relationship between family and home. And surely nothing is more important than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will hold my hands up. We are guilty of having had those EHCPs in the past that have had 80 odd strategies in them. And actually what we've tended to do is where we've almost having it as needed it at times as a way of actually managing where maybe the culture wasn't right and she wasn't getting what she needed, and to try and manage that. But actually then as soon as you're in a space where you get that trust and transparency and you get that communication, then actually you almost kind of forget the EHCP exists.
Yeah, you don't really look at it, do you?
Yeah, like I don't know.
Certainly don't count the number of speech therapy sessions you're supposed to have had,
and
which is what in our contrasting experiences we were doing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And not the quality and what that looks like throughout the whole school day. So I totally agree that sometimes it can be difficult, but I think a lot of parents almost becomes, because they've had these really difficult experiences through their previous interactions, I think often then they come into a new setting and a new year group or a new leader or whatever it is. And actually it's then those school staff understanding that they're bringing those experiences with them. And as parents, we always try and, when we go into a new space, try and go open-hearted with a clear mind to restart that relationship. But I think Jane McConnell said it brilliantly when she was leading the SEN tribunal, which actually said parents have a suitcase that they are forced to carry around. And in that suitcase is every interaction they've ever had with a professional before they met you. So don't feel that this is personally against you if they are distrusting, if they are combative, if they are finding it difficult, because actually they're probably finding it really hard to put that suitcase down. And I think that's something that we can all be mindful of. And I think teachers will probably have their own, and SENCOs probably have their own suitcase too, that they're carrying into that exchange. So
parents like us, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all got our own issues that we're bringing to that interaction. So as long as we can kind of be vulnerable and honest and clear with us, then maybe that's going to build a better foundation for communication moving forward. So that's been really helpful, guys. I think what we're going to do is take a really quick break and we'll be back with you in a couple of minutes.
Learn and Thrive is a charity enabling independence, building connections, and making young people with SEND safer. Through our free, online, accessible resources, we empower young people with the skills they need for real life. Find out more and explore our resources at learnandthrive.org.uk, or maybe head to our socials.
Okay, welcome back. So we're currently talking to Gary and Steve around the homeschool relationship and what that looks like, and what we wish both sides of the coin knew and understood better about each other. So coming back to you, Steve, what else do you think was something that you would hope that SENCOs and schools appreciate about families?
Oh, there's so much, Joe. On a really positive note, some of the teachers that he has and has had have made such a difference that I've been more than happy to kind of give him to them, if that makes sense, because that's what it feels like with our son. He's such a joy, and we put so much into looking after him. When teachers connect with him really well, and his face lights up when he sees them, and on top of that, he might even learn something when he's with them. That can be really special. It doesn't happen with all teachers. Some, he gets on fine with, but there's others that he really, again, you can see it in his face. He gets joy from spending time with them. So one thing I wish they knew is how much a bigger deal that was, and how important that is, because I know that there are people there who are genuinely just lovely and appreciate him for who he is and enjoy spending time with him. And yeah, they're there because it's their job, but there's a little je ne sais quoi that they bring that just makes it a bit special. And you try and show the appreciation, buy them a present at Christmas, but everyone gets teachers presents at Christmas. How do you express that? I don't know. You write something nice in their card, but really it's sometimes you're really touched by it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Can I come in there, Steve, and sort of challenge that? I don't speak much French, but that je ne sais quoi, sort of like you can't quite put your finger on it, but when it's there.
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying, I think. But I think the issue sometimes we have around SEND, when you've got, tens of thousands of schools across the country, you've got, a workforce of hundreds of thousands, is, now more than ever, it feels SEND really is everyone's responsibility. We've got the legal framework for it in the Children and Families Act, Code of Practice. We've got the numbers of pupils of SEND where it is everyone's business more than ever in every classroom, and fantastic. But we can give the impression that SEND is kind of something that some adults in schools, colleges, nurseries do really well, and others can't. And I think that's a notion that that needs challenging where it exists, because actually, of course, it starts with culture and mindset, doesn't it? But in terms of the strategies that that colleagues in schools, colleges, nurseries should be implementing, often they are things that are at the heart of them, are about valuing children, knowing your children, and some good what we consider to be good teaching anyway. So if you go through an EHCP and look at all the strategies, be there 80 or 5 or 6, they're often not things that only some colleagues can do. They might be things that only some colleagues kind of have the nous or intuition or experience to decide for themselves. But actually, that sense of course, some fights, we all have different strengths, don't we? But actually, the idea that only some colleagues in a department, in a school, in a phase team can sort of do good things with the pupils of SEND, I think is one that also is worth challenging. What do you think of that, Steve?
Well, I don't think that that's what I'm saying, because everything you've pointed out about the fact that SEND is everyone's responsibility and written into whatever legal framework, I want that to be taken as a given. Now, I'm not talking about the baseline. That should be there anyway. Every teacher should be good with children with SEND and do their job professionally and everything. I'm just talking about those special instances, those special people who build a particular rapport and put in that extra bit of effort and just connect really well with my son, and how much of a difference that could make. But I don't for a minute think that should be at all. And I'm totally with you in the sense that, SEND is there for everybody. It's everyone's responsibility. But I'd like to get to a point where that was taken as a given.
I think one of the examples I have actually kind of supports that a bit, Stephen, that we've had many teachers through the years that have been really great at teaching, Bethan, which is fantastic, and we really appreciate that. But really interestingly, one of the ladies that maybe gave me a bit of that, while you're talking about that feeling they really liked my child, and actually that brought joy, was ironically the one lady who I never managed to convince that my daughter should be there. She genuinely, for the entire 4 years of her secondary schooling, where she was in mainstream, this woman and we clashed on multiple occasions because she didn't believe that Bethan should be in a mainstream setting. I did. She did her best, but she was never really sold on the whole idea. But yeah, when I saw her with my daughter, the joy they clearly took from that interaction with each other, actually, I still got that feeling that she really liked her and actually cared about her. And it's balancing that, isn't it? So sometimes it can come from places that maybe you're not expecting. And I suppose that's not something we can expect of all staff at school, because that's personality.
Well, I think let's take Send out of it. I would say the same about my other son, that some teachers he has a really good connection with, and they go the extra mile, and I would want them to know how much we appreciate that as well. I don't think it's necessarily a Send specific point.
Maybe, definitely. So Gary, what's another thing that you would hope that families can appreciate?
So I'd say I hope that families are able to appreciate that the best teaching isn't always about doing things that are easy to see. So, for example, with that, where that trust is not there, families want to know more than they otherwise would, and they'd rather trust the school to get on with it. But where that falls down, then many families can ask of their children when they have Send, did you have a teaching assistant next to you, all day? They can ask, did you go out for intervention, today? Did you go out with the TA for some intervention today? And they can ask things like, did you have the slides printed out on your desk? I'm not talking about all children with SEND here. Clearly, some children will find those things hard to recall or communicate. But like for many children with SEND, families are able, when their child gets home, to say, I want to know these things about your school day. And really what the family's trying to do is get reassurance for themselves, understandably, that the school day, they had the support that they're due or that they need. But the best teachers sometimes are ones where we go, actually, we're going to take that TA slightly further away from working with this child because I recognize that they are doing well in this and can access this independently. So let's not give more support than the child needs with this particular task or activity. It might be that a child who goes out for intervention is missing this great teaching where actually the teacher desperately wants the child to stay in. And it may be that the slides on the desk can sometimes become a distraction, depending on the reason why they're there, of course. And actually the teacher wants to be delivering their lesson to all the pupils in the class, including, this parent's child. And therefore we're going to have empty desks because I want full focus on me. Whether that's eye contact or otherwise might be a different story. But those things are sort of visible. You can ask your child and they can give you a yes or no in many cases. What a parent can't ask a child is, did the teacher skillfully differentiate their questioning today in order to include you in the because lots of the best stuff, when you see it, and I spent a lot of time teaching, but also in lessons looking at things, the child is often not aware. The best practice is often ones where the child is not directly aware that they're getting something that is different, bespoke, individual to them, because it's kind of built into what the teacher does, either for everyone or just for that child or a group of children, but not in an overtly, and now here is your totally different thing. And in my experience, children and young people don't generally want, here's my totally different thing just for me. They want to feel, I'm a part of this class, I have value. When the teacher delivers this lesson, they're delivering it to all of us and they've thought about all of us. And where that doesn't involve different additional things, that can be a strength. So again, that comes back to trust. But in answer to your question, it's more sort of the things that can't be seen are sometimes the best things. And then as a kind of thing within that, what do we want SENCOs to be doing in school? What are the highest impact things that SENCOs can do? And I sometimes, I spend a lot of time talking to SENCOs, and I give them a list sometimes of 10 or 11 things where I say, here's different things that SENCOs do, rank them from highest impact to lowest impact. And what they generally rank as high impact is working alongside families, being in and around classrooms, direct contact with children, working alongside other leaders to make sure that whole school sorts of policies and practices are working with these children. And what they tell me, what many SENCOs tell me they're doing, and it does echo my experience personally, is filling in bits of paper and stuck in their office, stuck in their laptop. Now, I don't offer any sort of blame to SENCOs around that. And that is the system that we have, one where SENCOs have to spend a lot of time filling in bits of paper and doing things at the laptop. But the highest impact things that SENCOs tell me, and I agree with them, is by and large things that mean they're out and about communicating with families, children, and colleagues to make that practice better. So there are some things that I suppose I'm talking about bits of paper and referrals. I think that a couple of hours that a SENCO spends around the school working alongside other adults, including family as a key stakeholder, is often time better spent than a couple of hours doing, building a long referral to be able to send off. It's not black and white. It's not as clear as that, because sometimes sending off referrals to a different service unlocks a door or opens an access to something or gives us more information, leads to a practitioner coming in. But I think where SENCOs are telling you what I've done for your child is, and it's about all those things working alongside those other adults so that children's needs can be met. That for me is the golden stuff. And I hope that families are able to appreciate that when SENCOs and others tell you that's what they spend their time doing, that's the stuff we should praise, even if there isn't a sort of, a document that we're able to press send on at the end of the day. I'm in real danger of oversimplifying something that's complex here. But I think practice beats paperwork most of the time. And, I hope that that's the system that we kind of move towards, is one where SENCOs are incentivized to do lots and lots of being out and about around school, working with colleagues, children, and alongside families.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's really interesting you talk about kind of families being key stakeholders there. And I think through my work with families through SENDIAS systems and other things, so often families don't necessarily feel like they're a key stakeholder. They don't always necessarily feel that there is that balance of power, or they feel that actually they are equal partners in that relationship. Steve, is that something that you found, or by talking to other parents that you found?
Again, quite a mixed experience, probably. Yeah. Again, I go back to the point. Sometimes it feels a bit like lip service. Like, here's the interaction with parents that we've scheduled for this term or whatever, compared to really putting the meat to that, what that actually means. So actually taking it seriously and engaging on real issues that pupils are facing, rather than worrying whether or not you've done your stakeholder engagement this term.
Yeah, so you don't need it to be a tick box exercise, do you?
That's right.
So we've talked about an awful lot of things today, and it's been really great kind of hearing both sides of it. And thank you so much for spending your time. If we were to do a kind of a quick roundup for people listening to say, what can we do? What are the answers? Like, what are the key themes? And I think for me, one of the key things that I've been hearing throughout this is around actually about how important relationships are in those beginnings, and building trust and building transparency. And like you were talking, Steve, about, people understanding that when we give that child to you, the emotional impact of that and the strain of that and how that might impact our interactions with you has been one of the key themes for me coming out of this. Maybe if we can kind of come to you, Steve, and give us your kind of overarching view.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we don't lose sight of what education is supposed to be about, and to maintain its focus on those relationships and those children, and to put that front and center. And from my, bits of experience with the education system, I think that can very easily get lost. That it can become about the form filling or the tick boxing or the whatever Ofsteding, and that we should be putting people in positions of leadership who maintain that integrity to the principal cause behind the educational endeavour.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Gary. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with what Steve says totally. There are enormous problems with our educational system and SEND system, particularly across the country. And we are existing in a very imperfect system that hopefully works, hopefully gets better, and allows pupils to SEND a better chance of thriving while they're at school rather than thriving in spite of the system that they're in. But sort of my take home or overarching message, I suppose, would be one where I hope that all stakeholders are able to assume the best in each other and assume that people are doing their absolute best with the resources that they have. Nevertheless, and I've heard Steve talk about this before brilliantly, it is more on schools to trust parents than parents to trust schools, because of that emotional tie that family member has to the most important thing in the world to them. But nevertheless, assuming the best, trying to create productive relationships. And in the Parents' Guide to Send, we do sort of give specific examples of, well, these are sort of some of the conversations that we think for families it's really fair for you to expect or ask of a teacher, a SENCO, a teaching assistant, or someone else. When you're looking around a school for your child to potentially go there, when you're thinking about your child transitioning into or out of a school, what you might expect or ask for. So we've tried to kind of capture that in the Parents' Guide to Send in the way that I hope that people find helpful, because I think we all fundamentally are driven by the same broad goal. And then within that, we need that respectful and frequent communication to be able to work out where there are differences and work through them.
Brilliant. And for anyone looking for a more practical guide, then absolutely, that it's out on pre-order now, isn't it? I think.
That's right. Yeah, it's available at all good bookstores and Amazon, I'm sure.
Brilliant. So there's been so much to think about here, and I really hope that SENCOs and families kind of share this with the people that they're working with, so we can really start to kind of come together and make sure that we're putting the children and young people at the heart of all our actions. And it feels like from talking today that that's what we all want. So actually it is coming together to make sure we make that happen. So massive thank you to our guests, Gary Aubin and Steve Hull. I'm Jo Ayethray, and you have been listening to Life Skills Unfiltered.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks.